Today, we're going to dive into psychology, but maybe in a way you haven't thought about it before, as two very different but totally connected worlds.
So let's just start with a huge question, one that I'm sure you've asked yourself at some point. Why do we even dream? It's one of those amazing mysteries of being human. And it's the perfect place to start because it's exactly the kind of fundamental question psychology tries to answer.
So what is psychology, really? Well, at its heart, it's the scientific study of our minds and how we act. But what makes it so cool, so unique, is that it's kind of like a bridge. You've got the natural sciences over here, looking at our biology, our brains, and then way over there you have the social sciences, studying societies. Psychology is what sits right in the middle, connecting our inner biological world with our outer social world.
And that brings us to the main idea for today. See, psychology isn't just one thing. It's way easier to understand if you think of it as these two distinct worlds. First, you've got academic psychology. This is the world of research, of asking those big why questions. And then you have applied psychology. This is the world of practice, focused on a totally different question. How can we help? Okay, so let's start with that academic world. This is the foundation, right? These are the folks in the labs, using the scientific method to build the theories and the models that help us understand, the fundamentals of what it means to be human.
First up is biological psychology. This is all about that deep connection between our biology, our genes, our brains, and our behavior. A classic way researchers dig into this is with twin studies. By comparing twins, they can start to untangle that messy question of nature versus nurture and see the biological roots of everything from our personality to the choices we make. All right, so moving on from our biological hardware, we get to cognitive psychology. This field is all about the software, our internal mental processes. It's asking what is actually happening inside our heads when we think, when we remember, when we solve problems.
And this is a really key idea. Early on, psychology just looked at what you could see, a stimulus like a bell and a behavior like drooling. But cognitive psychologists said, hold on, what's happening in between? They call it the mediational process. So think about it like this. The stimulus is hearing a new song you have to learn. The behavior is you singing it. That mediational process, that's how you memorized it. That's the black box they're trying to crack open.
Next, we have social psychology, which looks at how we're all influenced by other people. And it works on two levels. First, there's the intrapersonal. That's all the stuff going on inside you, like your feelings and your self-concept. And then there's the interpersonal, which is all about how you interact with others. We're talking love, prejudice, group dynamics, the whole shebang.
And that leads us perfectly into personality psychology. This is all about what makes you, well, you. It digs into those consistent traits that make up who you are, the patterns that show up again and again, and why they tend to stay pretty stable throughout your life.
This quote from Einstein is just the perfect pivot point. Academic research is absolutely crucial for measuring what we can, but some of the most important things about being human, the things that really count, can't always be stuck in a spreadsheet. And that's exactly where the other world of psychology comes into play.
So let's jump into the applied world. This is where all those theories get taken out of the lab and put to work, solving real-world problems and helping people, like you and me, in our daily lives.
And believe me, the scope of this applied world is massive. Just to give you an idea, in a place like the UK, there are all these registered areas you can officially call yourself a psychologist in. We're talking everything from forensic and educational to health and sports psychology. It is a whole universe of professions.
Let's just zoom in on a couple of these, starting with sports and exercise psychology. This field uses psychological principles to help people perform better, and not just in sports. It could be for musicians, dancers, anyone in a high-pressure situation.
So what does a sports psychologist actually do? Well, they help athletes focus, they help them manage that crushing anxiety that comes with competing, and they work on team dynamics. And this stuff really works. For instance, the Sri Lankan cricket team actually hired a sports psychologist to focus on the team's mental health because they knew that winning is just as much a mental game as it is a physical one.
Okay, now let's tackle two of the fields that are probably the most well-known, but also the most easily confused: clinical and counseling psychology.
So what is the difference? Honestly, it really boils down to their main focus. Clinical psychology is generally about understanding and relieving more severe psychological disorders, things like major depression or anxiety disorders. Counseling psychology, on the other hand, is usually more focused on helping people deal with everyday life challenges and adjustments, stress, relationship problems, by helping them find and use the strengths they already have.
All right, let's head to a place where a lot of us spend a huge part of our lives, the workplace. This is where organizational psychology comes in.
These are the psychologists who work inside companies, and they're involved in so much. They help design better ways to hire people, they improve employee motivation, they run trainings. Their whole job is about making the workplace more effective and hopefully a healthier place for everyone in it.
So we've looked at the academic world of asking why, and the applied world of asking how can we help. But the most important thing to remember is that these two worlds aren't separate. They're two worlds for sure, but they have one single goal.
And this is the engine that really drives psychology forward. The research that happens in the academic world gives practitioners on the ground tools that actually work. And in turn, the tricky, real-world problems that those practitioners face every day, those spark brand new questions for the researchers to explore. It's this amazing, powerful feedback loop.
So in the end, it doesn't matter if it's a researcher in a lab studying memory or a counselor helping a client through a really tough time. The ultimate goal is exactly the same: to understand what makes us tick, and to use that knowledge to try and make the human experience just a little bit better. And that brings me to my final thought for you. Now that we've toured these two worlds, from building the big theories to solving real-life problems, here's a question I want to leave you with. Which one of these fields could hold a key to a challenge in your life?